My mom was single, so she couldn't really afford much. And I always wanted, Barbies and Barbie clothes and doll houses. But, she would get it for me, but, kind of secondhand. One thing she did was she got me a bunch of like pencils and, some paper. And that's where I really started to utilize my imagination. I would be kind of drawing my own little people and then I would make little cutout clothes and then I got to the point where I would get a cardboard box and I would just make my own dollhouse. I improvised. I think that's what really stemmed my understanding of what my gift was. I think when you realize, what your gift is, that's when life just becomes easier and, you're following the path of your gift that you were given at birth. From that point, I started sewing, or else I would get a bunch of clothes and upcycle. And this is when on the TV, I think we only had like maybe 20 channels. But I would always watch fashion television. So what I would do is my sisters would be my models. And I would just pretend that I would, be having my own fashion show, a little runway, and I would just kind of push them out, and say like, go, it's your turn, go, come back, change. When I think of it now, it's like that was always my gift ever since I was a kid.
Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 119. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Today's guest, I the minute she said yes, I was like, oh, this is going to be so cool. So I'll get out of the way. Please name and who you are.
Yeah, Dadana Stada Sizit Dekaze Kanawasiat Ata. I just said hello. My name is Woman Who Walks Over the Red Mountains, but my English name is Stephanie Eagletail.
Amazing. Yeah, I've kind of just, I don't know when you and I crossed paths. It was recently, and I got to, obviously I'm watching the work that you're publishing and what you're up to, so I'm blown away by what you do. So this will be a cool conversation for me just to hear it, just to understand, how this all came to be. So the gist of the show is I love the guests to go back as far as they want to go. How they grew up, where they grew up, who inspired you, what your interests were. So take it back as far as you want to go. And then you and I will kind of weave a path to where you are today and all the incredible things you're doing. So yeah, wind it back.
Okay, I think I can go as far back as my great-grandmother. So her name was Maggie, but her traditional name was Naditashe. And I actually named my youngest daughter after her. And kind of coming from her and my late grandfather and my grandpa's upbringing was he was raised by his grandma Maggie. So he never knew his biological dad. And his mom, her name was Mary One Spot. She actually had a few other kids. And she was a single mom. And so Mary's mom, Maggie, took in my grandpa at that point and raised him with the language, traditional teachings, all the legends, the stories of our past, our ancestors. And so Maggie she has a lot to do with, my inspiration of style. I love to really replicate her clothing and what she wore, coming into more of a, the modern day sense. And this was, I think, going back to the treaty signing. So Sutina signed treaty in 1877. And we actually situated ourselves here in the southwest area of Calgary. And we're part of a Dene Nation. So the Dene, there's over 1 million Dene, throughout North America, Turtle Island, and we just happen to be situated within the Treaty 7 territory. And I think that's what makes us kind of different is, we're on the Blackfoot Confederacy, and they allowed us to allocate and, survive here and live off the land. And yeah, and so that's where my grandma comes from, and her mom, and so forth, and going back generations.
Amazing. When you're growing up, do you the lessons and stories around like the heritage and the history, are those started from like a young age, like when you started learning your history very early?
Yeah. So my dad, his name's Hal Eagletail, and he's all of his stories were all passed down from my grandpa Fred Eagletail. And so, my dad, same thing, he passes it on to us. And, I recall my late grandpa telling us stories of his childhood, and also of a lot of just traditional stories that represent either our language or certain kind of sacred stories with bundles and so forth. And yeah.
Amazing. When you're a youngster, did you have siblings? Were you kind of like, was the family like a tight ball of energy, or what'd that look like?
So I think my family dynamics are a little different. My mom and dad actually met at the Blue Quills residential school. And how my dad even got there was my dad's mom, my granny Eliza Eagletail. She's actually from Saddle Lake, and that's where my mom is from as well. So my granny Eliza, met my grandpa Fred. They had 10 kids, and my grandpa was a U.S. airborne. So with his Army training, he ended up naming all the kids alphabetically. So A to L. They're E and F in the middle, and my dad's letter H. But yeah, so stemming back to my parents meeting at Blue Quills Residential School, and my granny Eliza went there as well. So she became very, very Catholic, and my grandpa was actually the one who was traditional. And so it was kind of like a balance of, both worlds, I guess. And yeah, but my mom and dad had 4 of us girls. I'm the oldest out of 4 sisters. And then when I was about 6, they had divorced, and my mom moved us back up north to Saddle Lake, Cree Nation. And yeah, and so I was always, back and forth, Sutuna to Saddle Lake. And I think what was hard for me as a kid was, just the family dynamics of, separation and, dealing with divorce. And, but yeah, no, today I love my parents, and I have more siblings. So my dad has 3 more children, and then my mom has another daughter. So there's a lot of us. We're like more of a blended family now. So yeah, but it's a big family. We have, I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and I'm the oldest out of 8 siblings.
Is that does that come with any responsibility? Did you feel any responsibility growing up that as the oldest, like what did you have to be aware of, and how did you have to operate differently?
Well, I think really after the divorce, my parents both battled with addictions. And, there was times I had to kind of be the big sister and take care of my sisters as growing up in Saddle Lake. And yeah, I think that was kind of a a little rough patch, having to take on a mother role at a young age. And, but thank goodness, my parents, they sobered up and became a little bit more aware of raising a family. And I think that's one of the biggest eye-opener for me was what the residential school actually did to our family dynamics was, everything became dysfunctional and there was addictions and, abuse and it just became normalized. And, I can't think of a perfect family, from anyone in Sad Lake or Sutina. Like everyone has their dysfunctions. But yeah, no, it's been a real eye opener. I think when the 214, like the Kamloops children were found, I think that really opened up just my mind as to, my parents being residential school survivors. Mm-hmm. And it made me a survivor, as well. I guess third generation, and just having to deal with the ripple effects of, the traumas. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does it, when it came out, does it just give you, kind of like a different perspective of like what your parents are going through? Just like, mm-hmm. It doesn't just, yeah, it kind of allows you to maybe understand what they were dealing with and why they were in certain situations.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I used to have a lot of regret and kind of anger towards my parents when I was younger for, separating. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until the findings and, for me to understand, the truth and reconciliation, and then hearing survivor stories and understanding that everything is, a ripple effect. And so it kind of gave me, I had to really put aside my own issues that I had and really look at, this is what my parents went through. And I'm lucky enough that I didn't have to experience what they experienced as children. So, I think for me it was a lot of forgiveness, forgiving them, forgiving just anyone who's ever, brought any type of harm to, my parents and myself. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Is it like forgiveness piece? It's harder to do when you're older. It's like we kind of are on our path for so many years that it's kind of tough to go back and be reflective and actually forgive. I feel like that's a big step.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think when I started my healing journey which was in 2020. Yeah, it's been 4 years now. But within this 4 years, it's been really eye-opening. For me, when I think of a healing journey, I really think of the 4 aspects of, our circle of life, our healing circle, and we divide it into 4 sections. And we focus on the physical, the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspect within our healing journey. And I think that was, creating self-awareness and self-love. And really, I took this amazing training with Colby Tatusis. And it was called Rise. And I think taking that training as well really helped me to understand, the self-awareness piece. And I really had to journey. I had to, we did what they call journeying. And that was really intense, to journey back, to mentally, close your eyes and to visualize and meditate, going back to your childhood, like, the baby stuff, and, just letting her know that she's loved and she's safe, and, really protecting the inner child, and securing that awareness. And so I think that was my big awakening, as within my healing journey, was the self-love aspect, because I'm a mom, and I went through a lot of challenges as well, being a mom, a young mom, and I have 4 children. And I kind of feel like there's times now where I reflect back to, when they were smaller, and what I could have did better as a mom, and,
Yeah. That's the self-awareness piece. Is it a bit of an unlock? Once you can kind of look within first, it feels like you can then move forward.
Yeah.
Is that it's not common. A lot of people don't think like that. They're always looking for answers outside first before looking inside.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you think it's just because it's not talked about? Like, why do you think that happens first? Like, why are the people looking outside first versus inside?
I think when you're looking outside, it's more self-pity. And then when you stop having self-pity within yourself, and that's when you really start to look inside and have more of that self-awareness, and, the self-love, and definitely, the forgiveness piece is what is key. But I feel like, I think that's why a lot of our people struggle, is because of the self-pity aspect, and also being dependent, on the system. And I think for me to actually really break away from that mentality was growth within myself. And because it's pretty hard living on the reserve, and it's totally different world. I growing up in Sad Lake, a population of 10,000 people, and then coming to Sutina, population of 2,000 people. So, but yet the dynamics of oppression and assimilation are the same. So,
when did you? No, it doesn't matter. When did you? When you were a youngster, did you split time between both, or did you kind of all the way through, and then you didn't kind of?
well, so I grew up in Sutina until I was 6.
Okay.
And I remember the day we left. And it was actually, we went on, remember when the Greyhound was up and running?
Yeah. The downtown looking. Yeah.
So we were on a Greyhound, and it was my youngest sister, Chas. It was her first birthday. And I remember singing happy birthday to her on the Greyhound leaving. So.
And that trip, just completely different, going from, from a 6-year-old, then to go north. It's just.
Yeah. Totally different. And, and then my mom became a single mom to 4 girls. And I remember living with, my gookum aunties, just my mom trying to find stability and trying to find herself as well. And so, I was always back and forth. There was a time where you remember when they had the payphone? And
Yeah, I do very
I'm
clearly.
like, yeah, I know
I'm old enough.
my kids call me old. They're
No,
like,
no.
you're in the 1900s.
I'm 47, so I'm like I'm right there.
And I remember being in junior high and I had no, communication with my dad. And I always loved my dad and missed him. And I think that was the hard part for me was, that separation. But I remembered my grandparents' phone number. Like I still remember it to this day.
Sweet.
And so I would actually, we had a phone at school, like a pay phone. And one day one of my friends taught me how to do like a long distance call. And so I called my grandma and grandpa and, they were really happy to hear from me. And I told them, I wanted my dad to call and to come see us. And so I really had to take it upon myself to build that relationship. I think it was more or less because my mom had, her resentments. Yeah.
When you were a youngster, what's got your interest as a youngster? Like what are you into at a young age?
I was actually I remember, my mom was single, so she couldn't really afford much. And I always wanted, Barbies and Barbie clothes and doll houses. But, she would get it for me, but, kind of secondhand. But one thing she did was she got me a bunch of like pencils and, some paper and that's where I really started to utilize my imagination. And I would be kind of drawing my own little people and then I would make little cutout clothes and then I got to the point where I would get like a big cardboard or a cardboard box and I would just make my own dollhouse. I improvised. And I think that's what really stemmed my understanding of what my gift was. And so I think when you realize, what your gift is, that's when life just becomes easier and, you're following the path of your gift that you were given at birth. And yeah, so from that point, I started kind of sewing and or else I would get a bunch of clothes and upcycle. And this is when, on the TV, I think we only had like maybe 20 channels, but I would always watch fashion television. And we had, Jeannie Becker, we had the Fashion Files, and so what I would do is my sisters would be my models. And I would just pretend that I would, be having my own fashion show, a little runway, and I would just kind of push them out, say like, go, it's your turn, go, come back, change. And I just really, as like when I think of it now, it's like that was always my gift ever since I was a kid.
Do you think you knew that? Or was it like just this interest that was pulling you there and you're like, I'm going to fill my time with this thing? Did you?
I honestly, I didn't know, but I think what really re-triggered that was the pandemic and, being in isolation. So that's when I started sewing again, was during COVID. Because I made my first coat when I was 16 with my mom and my auntie. And I kept begging my mom for one. I asked her if she can buy me one, but it was actually her idea she said, I'll buy you a blanket. And it was my 16th birthday. And, the blankets aren't cheap. And so she did that, and then we went and picked a pattern together and went to my auntie's, and she was the seamstress. And yeah, it took us, I would say, a couple weeks to actually finish the coat, because the way they taught me was very tedious and kind of strict. If I did something wrong, I had to do it again. And yeah, from that point, I did make a couple on my own without my auntie's guidance or my mom's guidance. And so that's when I just visually, remembered how to construct a pattern from a blanket. And yeah, and I find it so easy to do that I created a really simple way, and that's what I teach people now.
Amazing. Do you, when you're kind of discovering this creative side, were there any other friends around you that were into this, or were you kind of going down a different path based on interests?
Yeah, I think it was more or less, it was just more like my thing. I remember, being in junior high and senior high, and I always had my own style. And like back home in Sad Lake, everybody, they'll give someone nicknames and whatnot. And so my nickname was Hollywood. I don't know why it was Hollywood. I think it was because I dressed so, I don't know, different and bougie, I guess would be the word. Just had my own style, and yeah, so they called me Hollywood. It's funny. Yeah.
That and did the creativity just follow you all the way through, like junior high and high school? Like that was kind of this.
It did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when we still had home ec and, sewing and cooking. And I really loved the home ec class. And I think that's where I really started to understand a little bit more of fashion design and, kind of catching on easy and always kind of being like the first one done everything. And yeah, it was definitely my favorite subject.
Was there where'd you find your inspiration? I don't know what year this was, but I'm sure it was like, your options were probably limited. How'd you go about finding inspiration and kind of learning what was out there? Was it family driven, or just ideas in your head?
I think for me, it was like that inspiration really stemmed from when I started dancing powwow. And me and my mom, like we made a jingle dress together. And I did some beadwork, and, we really, I think that was kind of our only times of when we really bonded, was when we were creating, things together. And so I would go to powwows. But for me, what I really noticed at the powwow was all the dancers, come nighttime, it gets cold, right? And you're still in your regalia. And so everyone had Pendleton jackets. And that's where I really, kept asking my mom, I'm like, can you please get me a jacket so I can, walk around the arbor, do some laps, maybe snag, I don't know. But yeah, and so that's when she said, okay, we'll get you the blanket and we'll make you one. So
The powwow dresses, like were they, depending on where you're from, were they all different like styles and colors, and like was it this like collage of history, and like what would that look like? Was that a
yeah, so the style that I danced was jingle, and that originated out of Whitefish Bay in Ontario. And so it's actually known as the healing dance. So the more jingles you had on your dress, the more the sound would become more powerful. And they actually, yeah, they were the original what would I call them? I don't know. They were the OGs of the jingle dress.
That's it.
And now it's everybody, there's different categories. There's jingle, there's fancy, there's traditional, old style jingle, and contemporary jingle. So it really depends on what style you want to dance. But everybody, they design their own outfits, and colors all either stem from family, colors and family designs. And yeah.
Those like the family colors and the family design, were you taught that? Like or was it, were you shown things, or how do you start figuring that out?
Yeah, it's usually taught either, like for me, it was through my dad and my grandpa, and then going back to my granny Maggie. And so, it really stemmed for I think from the teepee designs. And I kind of wanted to replicate the color of the teepee of my great granny, which was red. And so, that color resonates with me, and because it's, my traditional name too. And yeah, it's I don't know. It really depends. Some people just have their own preferences as well.
So coming out of high school, what's got your attention, and what does your path look like?
Well, I ended up becoming a teen mom. I had my oldest daughter when I just turned 18. And I think, within 4 or 6 months, I ended up becoming a single teen mom. And yeah, so that really put a challenge on. I think I more or less was in kind of survival mode, and how am I going to raise a child on my own? And so I was actually living with my mom. And so my mom and my sisters, they would help me with my daughter. And my daughter's actually the first oldest granddaughter of our family. And today she's 16 years old.
Amazing.
And, it was kind of hard. It was kind of like she had to grow up with me, and I think that was the hard part of being a young mom. And then I ended up moving back to Sutina when she was about 2 years old. And so that was in 2010. And it was actually my dad who reached out to me and asked me if I can move back to take care of Granny and Grandpa. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. I said, they took care of me when I was a child. So, I wanted to reciprocate and take care of them. And so me and my daughter moved back to Sutina, and we started taking care of my grandparents. My granny passed within a few months because she had cancer. And then I took care of my grandpa until 2017 was when he passed. And I think within that kind of that time frame of, adolescence to becoming, an adult, throughout my 20s, I ended up having my other 3 children. And yeah, so, my 20s were all about taking care of a lot of people and not taking care of myself. And it wasn't until my 30s when I just kind of hit rock bottom. I had a rock bottom moment. And I think, dealing with a lot of unresolved grief and loss and, unresolved traumas. And it really affected me come my early 30s. And, I can talk about it today, but I think hitting that rock bottom moment was what really snapped me into, the self-healing journey and really opening my eyes to, what am I doing as a mom? What am I doing as a woman? Yeah.
Not everyone has those moments. Like some people won't figure this out.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Do you give that much thought? Why you actually did?
I think for me, it was because I lost my children, to the system. I ended up becoming an addict to alcoholism. And yeah, it was after my grandpa passed in 2017 was when I just felt myself going kind of downhill. And then 2019 was, when I hit rock bottom. And yeah, I ended up losing my children. I think for me, going through an apprehension was the hardest thing as a mom.
Mm.
And it kind of gave me that realization of, like, what am I doing? What am I, like, my kids don't have me, and I was actually, it took almost a year to like actually get my children back. So it was pretty intense, to go through the CFS system, and it was definitely probably my biggest challenge. And that's where I started, realizing my own self-worth and what am I doing, and how can I provide as a mother, and what am I showing my kids, basically. And it just felt like a ripple effect. It felt like a ripple effect of my childhood, and and just my parents, and just all of that intergenerational trauma was just really heavy at that time. So yeah.
When you're taking care of the family, you kind of, obviously you're probably the last person, that you were going to look after. So take care of everybody else. And then you kind of probably just
Yeah.
didn't acknowledge it or didn't have any time for it and just kind of did your thing. Do you know it? Like when you're in that, do you know what's kind of slipping away? Like, do you have thoughts about it? As you're taking care of everybody and you're kind of making some bad decisions, do you think about like, this probably isn't, or is it just you're kind of overwhelmed with everything else?
Yeah, I mean, I have those moments, I have moments of being triggered, and I just really think that having the self-awareness piece is key to the understanding of your actions and being in control of, your emotions. And yeah, because for me, it was a lot of anger. I was, a very angry child, and I became an angry adult, and I never got help for that. And I actually took anger management. I did basically everything I could to, get a better understanding of how to control my own behaviors. And I think that was the hardest part. Like, it's hard to control yourself sometimes. And there are times when I, have the moments of wanting to either give up or, move away, or but at the same time, I think what kind of brings me back is my children, and yeah, doing the best for them.
Do you think they, like that anger piece, was there even help available? Is it hard to access help?
I mean, it is like we do have resources on the reserve, but if you don't tap into the resources yourself, then you're going to have to go through the system like I did. It wasn't until hitting rock bottom and, going through the court system and like CFS where they provided me with resources. But before then, I would have had to kind of seek it on my own. And it's not something that's really talked about. It's not, we do have like healing facilities and health facilities on reserve, but I think there could be more that can be done to actually help people.
Just a little more like proactive, like just kind of.
Yeah.
The struggle to get your kids back, obviously that's like a monumental piece of your life.
Yeah.
That, now that you're on the other side of it, what is that, how do you frame that into your life right now?
Well, I think, that whole year of like 2020 and, going through COVID and going through that, that hard year, I really had to do a lot of work on myself. And I do look back to, the time of going through it. And, there's days where I'm sitting with my kids and we're having dinner and I just think, wow, like I fought so hard and I did so much work on myself to actually have this moment back. And there's a lot of families out there that don't have that opportunity. A lot of moms out there that, when you have your children taken away, the first thing you really think of is, well, for me, it was suicide. It's really hard.
They're your everything.
Yeah.
When this is all kind of like pandemic, it's kind of all right there. So there's all that pressure, like all the isolation and like,
Yeah.
like you couldn't have, it's just horrible timing, right? Like I can't imagine how that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was. But I think what really helped me was my dad. And, I had a really small support system, but a strong support system. And what my dad and my auntie, they kind of gave me a task. And if they didn't give me that task, the situation might have been different. But what we did was, I went through my year, 2020, and it wasn't until 2021 where my dad had recommended that I create a woman's transition home out of, my late grandparents' home. And so it was like they gave me this project and I put so much heart and soul into it that I wanted to help other moms going through what I went through in that, in the home and giving them access to, the help that I gave myself, which was through, just basically regaining of my identity. A lot of ceremony, a lot of prayers and sacrifice and therapy with mental health. And yeah, because it was really tough, that year. And I had no experience in creating, a home at all. But what I did was, I did my research and actually had a few people, help me. And we created a nonprofit called the Eagletail House Society. And the goal was, to make the home into a woman's transition home. And then we got charity status. And I think the final stage of opening the home was we had to go through chief and council. And that's where I had my first big setback. I remember, going to do a presentation with chief and council in person. There was me, my dad, and then we had our friend Earl from the Oxford House. And so we actually had two partners. We were going to partner with Oxford House Canada and Poundmakers Treatment Lodge. And so we all went in there together and, gave our presentation of what we were going to do with the home. And we needed chief and council's approval. We had to get a BCR. So a BCR is a band council resolution. And in order to get insurance for the home, for liability purposes, we had to go through chief and council to get the BCR, to get the liability. And they said they would get back to us. We did the presentation, it was done. And I got an email the next day from the nation CEO. And he just informed me that he said, "I'm sorry to tell you, but we cannot support your initiative at this time. And the liability is too much for the nation. If something were to happen in the home, or, if there was a woman who might have came and, something, right? Mm-hmm. Any type of issue, that they didn't want to be liable." And right there, I just felt failure. Like I did all this work and did all this stuff, and to not be supported from my own nation was hurtful. But going back to, not being supported was, I actually just took it, as a setback. And then I just started sewing again. And then that's where I noticed the sewing was becoming more successful and more supported from other people other than my own. That, to me, that was the path that I had to follow. And, I ended up just kind of getting rid of, like, canceling out the whole woman's home idea, and which was sad. But, I think it gave me the experience and understanding of creating something that type of initiative.
Like you said about your dad, like giving you a project. It also lets your brain work in a different way, and probably occupies it and challenges you, and for a good cause too. So didn't work out, but probably a lot of lessons were learned along the way.
Yeah. So, definitely a challenge. But, I think for me, that's part of living on the reserve is, we have to, it's kind of like back in, my my Granny Maggie, in order for them to leave the reserve, they had to ask the Indian agent if they could leave. And so the Indian agent would give them a pass, and, they would sign on a kind of a book log of, coming in, who's coming, leaving. And I think like that whole, like right there, that the Indian agent, the Indian Act, and everything that really oppresses us and keeps us confined and dependent within, the system, it really opened my mind to figure out, like how can I leave this systemic oppression? How do I overcome it as an individual? And so that's when I started doing the sewing lessons. And I've traveled throughout Canada, to different reserves and teaching how to make coats. And so now I'm independent.
Amazing. When you decided to start sewing again, did it just like come naturally? Like it was just like just started like it just flowed out of you. Just
It did. Yeah.
And then did you know right away that this is the gift that you talked about earlier? Like this is, you probably deviated from it for a long time, and then as soon as you picked it up, you knew you had something.
Yeah. Definitely came back to me, and I think that's what gave me the realization of, me as a mom, and being more observant to my children's gifts.
Can you explain that what you're seeing and how you act on that?
Yeah. So I notice, with my children, my oldest daughter is, she loves spirituality. She loves, like, I know she's kind of gifted within her own spiritual senses, I guess. I think, with being Native, there's a lot of people who were gifted spiritually stemming from, my lineage. My great grandfather, his name was Kutta Diglashe, and the Indian agent actually gave him the name Big Belly. And so he was one of our chiefs. So his name was Chief Big Belly. But he was spiritually, gifted, where he can actually talk to spirit or make connections that way. And so it does get passed on through the family. And a lot of my family are like, we're very spiritual today. We do a lot of ceremonies with Sundance or, Sweat Lodge or night lodges. But, that's our belief. And so my daughter is very, she loves attending ceremonies. And I feel like there's times she really connects spiritually. She loves tarot cards. She loves, crystals and, just anything spiritual, holistic. And she also loves guitar, though. Yeah, she's a little rocker. My son, his name is Nash Klishimiza. So, like my oldest daughter, her name's Asada. But my 3 kids, I actually named them traditional Tsuut'ina names. So that's how I registered them on like their birth certificates, and even when they spell their names, it's in Dene. And so my son Nash, he loves Lego. I'll buy him, the big box sets, and he'll have it done within a day or two. And so to me, he has that engineering mindset, and he loves science. So I'm very observant with him in that sense. And, I like to get him things that, it's things that are going to challenge his mind, because he's definitely, he's very intelligent. And my other son, Dina Shikla Hakeje is his name. We call him Dina for short. But he's the opposite of Nosh. He will be the bulldozer, and he will, just want to bulldoze things. And so I told him, maybe when you're older, you can create your own company where you can, wreck buildings and, just break things. Because he just likes to do that, which is weird. But he's also very athletic. So I see where he, every day he's shooting around outside with, and loves hockey. And he was also very smart with the language. So, there's things where if he's catching on to the language more than, me or the other kids, like I try to encourage him to, speak more to us. And, I feel like he's like he can be a language keeper. And then my youngest daughter, Natasha, she's, I already know she's going to be two-spirited. And she's told me, so for me as a mom, it's accepting my children, the way they are, and her too. She's, a tomboy, very athletic, but she's also very intuitive and, kind of, she kind of trips me out sometimes with, things she might say that, something's going to happen, it'll happen. But, I think it's always been in our DNA to have that intuitive gift with, spirituality. And yeah, so when my girls are, both of them are kind of the same in a way. And yeah, they both love guitar. So I don't know. For me, it's, I'm noticing their gifts now, and I'm being more observant as a mom. Because that was something my parents never did with me. They didn't see my gift as a child. And for me as a mom now, I feel like that is my duty, as a mom, to help them excel and support in whatever they want to do.
Amazing. Your sewing journey.
Yeah.
When you've kind of turned this back on, you've found your gift again, and what's actually been going on? How has it been a complete unlock? Like, has it just put you on a path?
Yeah. Yeah, I felt like when I did a lot of, I guess, praying, manifesting, throughout that whole year. Like, those first 2 years were pretty crucial. And I felt like I never prayed so hard, in my life, to have my children back and to be a mom again. But also I prayed for my path in life. And I did a lot of sacrifice and, sun dancing. And I think that's what really, kind of gave it that boost of success was, making that commitment through ceremony and prayer. And it was actually, I remember it so clearly. It was in March of 2022. And my friend Nikita Dene, I grew up with her in Sad Lake, but she was working in Louisville, Muscogees. and she had a women's group, and she asked me, I mean, she noticed that, I was making coats and doing little orders here and there. And so she asked me, she's like, would you ever do a class? And I was like, I don't think I can do a class. I said, I've never taught, I don't have the experience. I don't have, the, I guess, certification or education behind teaching anybody anything. And I just felt like, the imposter syndrome was really holding me back. And so, yeah, so I told her, I'll think about it. And, I talked to my family about it. And then I was trying to figure out, like a system of, what would I charge? What would I, like, where do I begin? What do I do? And so I told her, I said, okay, I'll do that first class. And it was crazy because the first class was supposed to be a class of 10, and there's actually only 4 women showed up, which I was, happy because I didn't have like a big group. And so that's when I started creating a structure, within garment construction and pattern design. And one thing about my lessons is, like, I don't use patterns. And I think, that's kind of where, like, my gift is I don't need a pattern to make a coat. I look at a person and I could see their measurements. But stemming from that first class in March of 2022, the first class was good. It was a success. The women finished their coats. They looked awesome. I was proud of it. And then she said, well, can we do another class? We want a second group. And I was just kind of like, okay, like, yeah, okay. So I think I did maybe in total like 3 or 4 groups within Louisville. And that's, and then doing it by myself, right? And so I told myself, I kind of gave myself a little goal timeline, a 3-year timeline. And, I put it out there and, manifested my goal and what I wanted to do within these 3 years. And so the first year was teaching, the lessons on my own. And it was, it was a challenge. I would have class participants anywhere from 5 to like 25 people. And I would be alone, and I would have to help each person alone. And, day 1, it's our cutting day. We'll have, just nothing but cutting everyone's coats and the blankets and then situating them to sewing machines. And some of them, have never sewn a day. And so I'd be giving little tutorials on, this is how you set up a machine and this is how you sew. And, and the first thing they would create is, a Pendleton coat. And so that first year, it was just me, but I think that's where I kind of hit my first quota of over 100 people from March to, that December. And then going into the next year, 2022, well, actually, no, it's the same year, sorry. I'm just trying to go back. We're in 2024. So 2022, 23, okay. So, 2022, I actually put in, I don't know, something was telling me to go to New York. And I did a 10-piece collection, New York Fashion Week. And I actually had the opportunity to meet with the Hudson's Bay Company when they were, going treaty to treaty area and their little path of reconciliation. And so I ended up meeting one of the ladies there. Her name was Tiffany, and they were really intrigued by my Hudson's Bay coats. And we ended up doing kind of like an oral history with the Downey Wenjack Blanket Fund. And so I kind of gave them, a little history on why I chose to utilize, the Hudson's Bay blanket. But Tiffany and her group, she brought content creators, and they came to watch my show in New York. And then that's when I had asked Ashley Collingbull to come model. And there was a few models, I kind of wanted a little mixture of just in different Indigenous, treaty territories to come and represent their nations. And so that's when I did my first show in New York. But last year is when I did the 20-piece collection. And so it was a lot more work. We were making coats for the collection, and at the same time we were teaching people how to make coats. So it was, that second year, it was pretty hard, but that's when I was able to, hire an assistant. And so I started, last year, July, I started apprenticing my current kind of main first assistant. And she's actually from Ganawage, Mohawk territory. And she's actually been teaching lessons herself now. And so that was kind of for my third year. That was my goal, to have an apprentice, for the apprentice to go out and to teach, what I've taught her, and to go to other nations and represent, my company. And so she's been doing that, her, and so I have another assistant now this year. So there's three of us kind of working together. And it's just kind of ironic, though, within my 3-year goal timeline was, I had to become a single mother at the same time. So I felt like putting out, the goal of having apprentices to go and do the work for me actually allowed me to, be more present with my kids again. And because I was, gone throughout that whole first year, I was, gone, and we had stability, and, the kids were, the dad was around. And, but now this year it's been a little bit of a challenge, being a single mom, but I'm definitely happy. I'm happy, and I think that's one of the main things is, my children see that I'm happy, and I'm still being supportive. And but again, I kind of felt like, I had to go through the whole ripple effect again, right? And so it's just, but at the same time, I want my kids to just know that I'm there for them, just regardless of anything that happens.
How do you, you've been on this upward swing professionally for a few years now, I always find it interesting where there's two sides to it always, right? sometimes that balance of having everything going up is just not
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. I mean, the success is definitely there. Like, my name has definitely, become more known.
Mm-hmm.
I think definitely going to New York and, showcasing pieces there has really brought that to life. But also doing the sewing lessons, teaching, we're at about 380 people we've taught. So it's been very busy. But yeah, definitely, there's two worlds. I have,
Mm-hmm.
the success, but also the personal life, which is, a bit of a challenge, but
Mm-hmm.
persevering. Yeah.
The manifestation piece.
Mhm.
How did you? What did that look like for you to kind of come up with your 3-year plan? I would love to know because I have my own. I don't know how to. I feel like when I start saying things out loud to different people, and just like over and over, it feels like that is the start of my kind of projects. How do you like? What was your process going through that to kind of? What was your manifestation program?
I think how it all started was when I started doing my healing journey, the whole like going through 2020 and really going through that hardship. And it was actually, there was three of us. There was me, my cousin, and my sister. And we really kind of stuck together and, supported one another. We would always talk about our goals and what we wanted to do. And then we started saying, like, well, maybe we should, manifest it and meditate more on things. And so, like, my auntie as well, she was one of, the people that really encouraged that manifestation piece.
Mm.
But I think what really opened my mind into manifesting was there was one quote my late grandfather always said, and it was, he said, we're not humans having a spiritual experience, that we're spirits having a human experience. And I think when you start to understand that and realize that, I have a spirit, and which is my traditional name, right? Woman who walks over the red mountains. And in order to make my spirit stronger in this life is I have to be good, be gentle with myself, be good to my spirit. I always call my spirit too when I travel. And I really feel like when you talk to yourself, to your spirit, that you're putting your words out there, right? And I always say, what you think is what you're going to become. And so I actually made a vision board, and even on my phone, I have my vision board that I look at, and my little my tabs, right? I have affirmations on my tabs, and just everything I look at, everything I do. I have things in my home, just reminders, right, of, stay calm, stay happy, and think positive. So I really kind of felt like I had to really tell, like, it's kind of like a mental battle, I guess, because you have something telling you, the imposter syndrome, that you can't do anything, you won't have the success. But then you have the other part where you have to say, I am successful. I am going to become a millionaire. I am going to, my children are going to be healthy. I'm healthy. It was crazy though. Like I think one crazy manifestation story though is with my kids. And so it was last year, 2023, kind of like around January. My sons are like huge Flames fans. And so there was that one day they were waiting outside the Saddle Dome to get signatures. And they kept seeing, some of the Flames driving out with Ford Broncos. And when they got home, my two boys, they just came up to me and they're like, we want to get a Bronco. They're like, the Flames all have Broncos. And I was driving this little Ford Escape. And I was like, dang, like, I don't know. Like, we're going to have to manifest that. And so what we did was whenever we would get into, the Ford Escape, and I would tell my kids, like, okay, let's manifest, we're getting into our Bronco, and we're driving a Bronco down the road. And so I said, you guys have to feel it. And you have to internalize that feeling that, yes, this is what we're driving. And we did it every time we got into the vehicle, right? And there was, I think it was in April. Yeah, the first week of April. I remember I was leaving Fort Chip. We did lessons there. And we ended up spending the night, I think, in Fort McMurray. But I was looking on like Kijiji, like just looking for I just typed in, black Bronco. And this one popped up and it was in Camrose. And so we were actually going to be going to Edmonton for the boys, hockey tournament. And I had the kids with me and we were going to drive to Edmonton, but something told me, go to Camrose and just look at it, look at the vehicle. And so I told the kids, like, okay, we're going to manifest, imagine, we're in our Bronco, we're driving, and then we get to Camrose and we did a test drive in the vehicle. And I asked the kids, I said, so what do you guys feel? Like, how do you feel in this vehicle? And they said, well, it feels like what we would feel in our other vehicle. Like they would internalize the feeling. And I said, okay, I'm like, well, this is going to be ours. I said, we're going to get it. And yeah, sure enough. So I ended up getting approved for the Bronco. And we ended up leaving our Ford Focus there. And then we drove to Edmonton on the Bronco. And it was just so, it didn't feel surreal, but I felt like, wow, manifestation is real. And my kids were so proud. And so I told them, I said, whatever you guys think and feel, that's what you're putting out to the universe, and try to feel good things, try to think good thoughts. I said, as hard as it was for me to, overcome my challenge, I really had to fight the negative thoughts. And I really had to just mentally tell myself every day, I'm a good mom. I'm going to get my children back. I'm going to become successful and, find my path in life. And yeah, and so we're here today.
It's quite the journey, right? Like I obviously for me hearing it the first time, it goes all over the place. Do you have a vision for the next little bit, what you want to do and accomplish?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. It's got
So my 3-year plan turned into a I guess, a 5-year plan, and just, sticking within that. And, my children are growing, and, within 2 years, I'm going to have an 18-year-old. Within 5 years, I'm going to have another 18-year-old. So it's, thinking about their future, growing with them, but also, growing my business. And yeah.
Amazing. It's going to be cool to watch. Now that I've connected with you, it's going to be really cool to see what you accomplish and
Definitely.
what you create. Thanks for doing this. This has been amazing. I end the show with one question. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
Well, I definitely think of diversity, inclusion, and, working towards a path of reconciliation within the city, but also within, the Indigenous communities surrounding. Yeah, but I love the city. It's always been our neighbor, and I grew up always wanting to live here, as an adult. And I mean, the people are amazing. I've never had any, run-ins with anyone being arrogant or anything towards me as, an Indigenous woman, but I've always had just compliments, compliments going downtown, or if I'm wearing one of my coats. I think for me, that big piece of inclusion was being on the cover of Avenue magazine. That moment of wearing one of my coats, standing in a spot where my great grandma did trading for goods, near Fort Calgary. And that was a really big realization of, we're growing, but also we're becoming more, supportive and on a path to reconciliation.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That must have been
It was.
an experience.
It was powerful, yeah.
Thanks for taking the time to do this.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I was excited when you said yes, because I love hearing stories, so I knew I wanted to hear this one.
Well, thank you for having me.
My pleasure.